Well, good evening and welcome to the Authentic Joe Show. I am Jo Lena Johnson, your host. My first name is Joe and my middle name is Lena. Joe means love and Lena means light. And my hope is to bring some love and light to you and to this world this evening. I want to thank you so much for joining our race relations episode. And we have some great guests in store for you and hopefully some great conversations. I hope that you please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is YouTube at Authentic Joe Show. It's pretty simple. Please share it with your friends, like, subscribe, watch. We're really trying to build up our followers, and we hope that we're bringing you something great. Also, we are live on Facebook. And so if you have anything you would like to share, we have shared the link. So if you want to come in to the StreamYard link and add something to the show, you can come in our studio and we'll let you talk too. So without further ado, I would like to start with, before I introduce our guest, I would like to start with a quote. May I have the quotes, please? Excellent. A narrow mind and a fat head invariably come on the same person. That is not the one I want to start with. It's so funny. That is so true. We'll get to that one. Here it is right here. All great achievements require time. And what I would say is oftentimes one of the reasons we don't get what we really want is because we don't have intention to get what we really want. We don't have the heart to get what we want. We don't have the courage to get what we really want. And we don't take the time to invest in what we really want. And I believe that things can be better if we really want it. And that takes each and every person being committed to making this world a better place. And when you think about race relations, I wonder, what do you actually think? There are different definitions of race, and you can best believe I looked them up. But we're going to talk about it with our guests this evening. So all great achievements require time. So that is Maya Angelou. She quoted that. We can remove that for right now. Okay, and let's welcome our guests. Hello, Aaron.
Hello. How you doing, Joe?
Good. How are you? Okay.
Oh, I'm doing great.
Awesome. So Aaron and I, we've known each other for a very long time. We actually graduated from high school together. Oh my gosh. So we represent Generation X on this powerful broadcast. Okay, who's next? We have James Ingram. He's a columnist from the St. Louis American. How are you, James?
Doing well, Joe. How are you?
Good. I'm so glad to see you almost smiling at me. It makes me feel great. Okay, excellent. And then next we have Michael. Hello, Michael. How are you?
I'm great, Jo Lena. How are you doing?
I'm great. And Michael and I, we work together in some volunteer capacities. And so I've known all of these guys in different, I think we have a technical issue. It's not playing on YouTube. That's what I'm told. Thank you. Okay. Great for, communication. Sorry about that. So a lot of things have been happening, and I know that many people will probably watch this broadcast in the future, so they may not watch it tonight, but tonight, as we're live, it is election night in the United States. And so what happens on election night? People run races. And so the reason I call this show Race Relations is because I think we have so many interfacing aspects of what race really is, especially in the world, not just America, that it makes such a difference. So YouTube is up. I'm so excited. Thank you very much. And so when I say the human race and I say ethnicity and I say competition, those are three separate definitions of race. However, look how they're intertwined: human race, ethnicity, and competition. How would one of you care to talk about how they intersect in terms of how you see things?
Okay, I'll give it a shot.
Awesome.
It's interesting. I didn't expect that. Race and ethnicity, yes. Competition, part of it, but is it a desirable part of an intersection of these concepts? I'm not so sure. I know one of the things that I've shared with you in the past, Jo Lena, is about my belief that all social injustice begins with personal injustice. And when there's this strong degree of competition, I think that you're not being just to yourself. which means that, to me, that means that you don't realize your own value and worth, who you are, and therefore you have to compete with others in order to help you establish an identity. And that's not being just to yourself. So race and ethnicity, is this something that, to me, these are things that we recognize because they're there, they're fact. Everything to me has a material side and a spiritual side. And the material side is that, yes, we look at one another and we see there are differences, and we have different, and we're of different races and ethnicities. But the spiritual side is we're all made of the same stuff. So I don't know. Is that what you were looking for? Is that what you?
I just wanted your answers. I think it's fabulous. They told me that I'm supposed to call on you guys, but I wanted to give you a chance to think about it because I really want it to come from, where you're coming from. So, Aaron or James, would you like to go next and answer?
I'll go ahead. Since I've been brought up in elementary school, all the way through the military, and now where I work at now, I believe race relations are absolute paramount in order for you to achieve goals. You have to get all ideas from all people, whether they're black, white, Asian, or any other color, in order to achieve real goals. I mean, you can't go through life without competition. You're going to have competition. It's just how you deal with that competition, which is going to either make you a better person or it's going to turn you to other things. And I think that that's happening a lot these days with people getting their news from other outlets, Facebook and other outlets like that. They can sink into a dark corner. And I think it's up to me and other people to try and shed light on that with people that have real differences with how you vote, who you talk to, and things like that.
Thank you.
It's exhausting, to be honest with you, sometimes trying to talk and walk the good walk and tell people and sound smart, I guess you could say, and coming at them with real facts, because that's what you need nowadays, because there are a lot of mistruths out there, and you see it with the elections. I mean, you see them, saying stuff like, she's lying because her lips are moving. You know what I mean? So I think it's important to address all the issues and talk to all people.
Very good. Thank you. And James, before you speak, I just want to say I consider James a professional colleague as well as a friend. And this show really started with me wanting to talk to James because he does write political columns and has been doing that for so many years. And his expertise really is in policies and politics and things like that. And yet he is a kind soul who helps the underprivileged or certain areas of the public live better lives. So I'm very interested in what you have to say, James.
Well, I hope since this is the Authentic Joe show, I'm going to be authentically James, and I hope these decent gentlemen here consider me to be a kind soul once I say what I have to say. But let me say this: I listened to the definitions. I have no disagreement with what was said, and in theory, everything that they said is true. However, not only as a columnist, but as a black man in America, race, as we know, particularly in the last 6 years, since we're talking about politics tonight, has been weaponized in ways that it has never been weaponized before. There's always been an undercurrent of race and a racism in the politic that we engage in America, but it's become more pronounced in the last 6 years in ways that are not beneficial to the furtherment of this country or of race relations. In fact, race relations, have, I think, are more frayed now than at any point that I've ever seen in my lifetime.
Yes, thank you for that. Race weaponized. I think that's a great way to go. And Aaron, I want to say thank you, because you were like, it's exhausting. I've never heard. I mean, every day as a Black woman in America, either me or someone I know, we get exhausted. But to hear that you also get exhausted, is hopeful, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I'm in rural America. I tell people
Rural
I'm right in the middle of the
Missouri.
corn. Yeah, I'm right in the middle of the cornfields. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of I can't say it any other way. There's a lot of ignorance out here. It's exhausting to talk about things like the pipeline and things like that, and just race relations altogether. Like I said, it is exhausting, but I'm always game.
Mhm.
If they want to talk about it on my Facebook page or wherever, I'll talk about it. But some of them aren't going to like what I got to say.
Right. Well, one of the discussions that Aaron and I actually had on Facebook, I had made a post about the Supreme Court and how they were taking affirmative action to the Supreme Court, and that it was very likely that it was not going to be upheld on the university levels. 2 different universities were challenging it. And so Aaron's post was, well, as a man, as a white man, I've been, passed over by jobs by women and people of color. Did I like it? No, but why did they get it? Because they were more qualified than me. And that's just part of what it is. And so, I'm afraid, things have changed. And again, going back to what James said, the word weaponized, when we think about elections or the races, right, that are going on election night, they are races. But when you take it and you say the competition, I've never felt like I was in competition with other people, really. I'm just here to live my life and do my thing. But when I hear that people don't want affirmative action, or they don't want to move forward, they want to move backward, or they want power, or these things, and then I hear it's out of weakness or fear, I really don't get it. Because the people I love, many of the people I love, I'm afraid every time they walk out of the door. But then people are saying, well, not only do I have money, and not only do I have a whole bunch of power, not only do I have a whole bunch of influence, but not only do I have mine, I don't want you to have any, so I want to take yours as well. And I really don't get that.
Right. I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think there's always just a low-key competition going on. I don't think it's always in your face. You know what I mean? I think it's sometimes low-key. But I think the competition actually makes us better people too, depending on how you deal with that competition. You know what I mean? If somebody beat me out because they had a better resume or me, a better interview than me, then I have to learn off of that and make myself a better person. It's not about, to me, it's not about color. But there are a lot of people out there, especially in the area that I'm at. It's all about that.
Gotcha.
It is. Yes.
James, what do you think about this? Thank you, Aaron. What do you think about this? What this slide is saying, James?
If you don't know, the thing to do is not to get scared, but to learn. Yeah, right. We always should be in a learning mode, in terms of each other, in terms of history. As we know, if you don't learn history, you're bound to repeat its mistakes. But much of what we're talking about here, and I'm not going to tap dance around this thing.
Okay.
We're talking about a power dynamic. It's not about whether your resume is better. We had Black people who had credentials and had the ability to do jobs for a couple of 100 years, and were denied opportunities to go and be admitted into colleges and to be admitted into certain work places. And it had nothing to do with resume. It had to do with race and racial discrimination. And so a lot of this is about power. And as Frederick Douglass says, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. So this is about remaining in power. And there's much going on in terms of this country, in terms of there are people, racists, I would say, not I'm not going to categorize everyone, racists who are looking at the shifting racial dynamics in this country, that by the year 2030, whites will conceivably be in the minority in this country. You already see a major shift. Hispanics are a larger minority now than African Americans in this country. So that dynamic is shifting. And if I'm an individual who's been in power for 300 years plus, and I want to remain in power, I have to do something in order to keep the status quo or maintain the status quo. So this is what's behind a lot of what we see, particularly in the some of these verdicts and some of these things that we see coming down in the Supreme Court, trying to reverse rights for women, trying to reverse rights for Blacks, Hispanics, and others in this country. So it is a power dynamic that we see at play, and unfortunately, much of it is based upon race and racial issues that were never resolved in this country. Because I heard the term, I think, affirmative action or something mentioned earlier. If you don't address a problem that you've had in this country for 300 years, you're going to continue to have that problem. Lincoln spoke about it. Jefferson spoke about it. That that God's justice won't sleep forever. And there are things that have been done to appease folks in this country, but it's never been truly addressed. And until that's the case, there's going to be a problem, and it is much more pronounced now than ever before. And it's unfortunate, but that's the reality that we live in.
Thank you. Michael, I'm going to assume that you are the elder statesman in our chat today.
Good assumption.
I know a little something about you, that's all. What's your opinion? Because you've been around a long time and you've seen a lot of ebbs and flows. So James said a lot. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting, James, because I did read, I read the article that you wrote about your maternal grandfather, and to see the progression from his time, I think you said he was born in 1913, up to when I was growing up. When I was a teenager, I was 14 years old when Dr. King was assassinated. So I definitely was not a genius, and I graduated with like a 2.67 grade point average from high school. But I was always very interested in what was going on, and I read a lot, and I took in a lot of what was going on, and I couldn't understand the things that I heard being said in my neighborhood. I went to a high school that had over 2,000 students in it, and there may have been a dozen Black students. One of the families was one that I had known from elementary school. And not to get too far astray, but the fact that you've talked about politics being weaponized, I have seen that from those days to now. I saw things, what I thought was getting better, and to come to the point that we have in the last 6 years, it's discouraging. It's one of the reasons why I write a lot of the things that I write. And it's because it just, we can't live in it. Joe, I think you mentioned earlier that I think you said something about waiting or that time is required. It was one of the quotes that you had, I think. And I remember Dr. King said, no, in his letter from the Birmingham City Jail, no, waiting is past. There's no, that you can't keep saying, wait. And James, what you said about just placating, people just placating, assuaging, giving, nobody's going to give away power if they operate from ego. If they operate from ego, they will never give away power. And that reality is something that we have to account for in government. And so it can't be just gestures, just empty gestures. For instance, in St. Louis, I still remember this, when the protests were going on, it was like the St. Louis Police Department said, okay, here are the blocks that you can protest in. And, we've given this to you. Don't go outside. That's meaningless to me. That kind of thing is meaningless, because it's saying, we'll give you this far, but no further. And when I think back to my teenage days and to what was going on, when I think back to my childhood, and I was young enough and my mother was from Southeast Missouri, I still remember as a little kid in the late 50s, going down there and seeing in the one gas station in the town where my grandparents lived, over the drinking fountain, whites only. I mean, and I remember asking my dad and my mom about that. And their response was always, some people just don't accept what's going on. Now, I'm not saying that they were not racist. And I'm not saying that I'm not, in ways that I am probably not even aware of. But I will say that I struggled with this as a kid in that same town. One day we were walking down the street in their, what they called their uptown area. And two black men came towards my mom and my little sister and I, and they stopped and they stepped off into the street to let us pass. And I remember I didn't understand. I said, what are they doing? And she said, well, that's what's expected of them. Oh. These are things that have stuck with me from my childhood, and why, obviously, I'm an old white guy. But there are a number of old white guys and girls, women, who feel so strongly about this because we came up during that time and we saw the injustice. We saw the struggles to gain justice. And now my position is I need to be an ally. I don't need to be the one to say, this is the way it's got to go. This is the best way. What I need to happen is for the Black leadership, whatever area, to take that role and to say, and for me to let them know I'm here. Not only am I here, I'm here to assist with resources. I'm here to, if there are questions about where I'm coming from or where anybody else, if there's consultation that's desired or required, I'm here. But for me to say, okay, I get where you come from, and so let me mold and craft this. That's the same thing. That's the same shallow shell that means nothing. So I don't know. Maybe I've rambled too long, but that's kind of where I am at.
Well, thank you for saying that, Michael. And I think you've always been wonderful to me. And I, until, well, some of you may or may not know, but we all hail from Missouri, basically. James is from East St. Louis, Illinois, but the rest of us are basically St. Louis, although I was born in Iowa. When the school shooting happened here locally a couple of weeks ago, it was quite disturbing. And we just ended up having a kind of an impromptu talk about that. And Michael had some ideas about what the St. Louis public schools should do. And I think until things happen directly to people, we often ignore them, right? So we've been hearing about these school shootings. And I think at that time, there were like 67 around the country this year, I believe. I think that was the statistic. And it's like, I was disturbed, obviously. Okay. But I'm disturbed every time there's a school shooting. And I'm very disturbed that guns are more important than children or people. And so, James, I'd like you to talk about, Michael said a couple of things. He said something about some people don't accept what's going on. That was I thought that was an interesting answer when his parents saw the signs. What are the signs about? And then his parents, their answer was, some people don't accept what's going on. So I take it to mean they didn't accept that Black and white people should be able to drink from the same fountain. So they had to allot a fountain of their own so that they could drink from. And then Blacks were supposed to have their own fountain, which may or may not be working. So he talked about acceptance and also expectations. Two things that have concerned me. I know that Hispanics, as you said, are they are already outnumber Blacks, but I also have noticed on the census forms and things like that, all types of identifying forms, they'll say, are you Hispanic or white? So it's like they're trying to group in Hispanics. I'd like you to talk about that, James. And then also gerrymandering, because I think a lot of times people hear that term if they listen to the news, but a lot of people aren't listening to the news. So what are the ramifications for classifying Hispanics as white, and what are the dynamics of gerrymandering, and why do they matter so much?
I'll address that, but I do want to thank Michael for taking the time to read the column. I could at some point maybe I could share some stories that my grandfather shared with me about his experiences firsthand in the South, which would would be disturbing, but I think informative as well. Anyway, this issue of having the white/Hispanic verification in terms of whether it's census or other things is very interesting to me. I consider myself to be fairly well versed with on Hispanic issues in the population. I have a lot of friends who are Hispanic. I've traveled to Honduras, to Havana, Cuba, to the Dominican Republic, to many places that they have a Latino population, Hispanic population. And what I've found is that the same damage was done to them in many cases, mental, psychological damage that was done to African slaves, in terms of this foisting upon them this dominance of European culture. I remember seeing a play at a cabaret in Cuba, in which they talked about in the play, it was all in Spanish. You had the arrival of the Spaniards, and they showed the African slaves bowing down to them in submission. And fast forward to the 50s. First Hispanic you saw on TV was Desi Arnaz. It's Ricky Ricardo. You see Gloria Estefan, who's Cuban, who migrated to America. These are the images that you see of Cuba when you see them on TV. When you go to Cuba, this is what you see in terms of the branding, in terms of the leadership. However, if you're on the ground there, 75% of the people are darker than I am. Same thing if you go to Puerto Rico. Same thing if you go to Honduras. You go to these places. So there is a willingness on the part of many Hispanics, and they can disabuse me of this notion if they choose, to identify with Europeans as opposed to identifying with whom they are. Classic example is we just got out of the World Series. There's a big uproar. This is the first World Series in 70 years in which we didn't have an African-American player, but you had black players on both teams. They just happen to be of Hispanic heritage. What's the significance? The significance is they just got dropped off on a different island than my ancestors got dropped off on, but they were just as black as I am. But if you talk to the Dominican players or the Cuban players, they won't tell you that they're black people. They will tell you that they are Dominican, which is just as insane as me telling you I call me a black man, saying, no, I'm not black, I'm American. I didn't ask you what your ethnicity is. I didn't ask you what country that you came from. I asked what you are. But because there is no intrinsic value in being a black person in America, they watch CNN, they watch all of the networks in their countries. They see that there is no advantage to being black. So I'm not going to identify as black. If I can have the option between checking white as opposed to Hispanic, I'm checking that. And the answer, that's half of the answer to your question, Jo Lena. The other half is that it skews the demographics.
Gerrymandering does, yes.
Yes, exactly. When they give inaccurate information, now you're thinking you got more white people here, and they're walking around, they're darker than Jo Lena and I. So it doesn't. And it's because of this internalized self-hatred and denial of who and what they are that is part and parcel of racism in America.
Very good. Thank you. Aaron, I don't know if you remember, but, we didn't hang out in high school. I mean, I knew who you were, but, we went to school in North County of St. Louis, right?
Sure.
And we graduated in 1988. We're telling our age, right?
Yes, we are.
And so when we got to high school, the only time I went to a white person's house was when Penny Randman's, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said her whole name. Penny's house, excuse me. Penny's house, and her parents allowed us to do our floats, our homecoming floats. So we gathered as a group of kids for the class of 88 to put our floats together. Okay. But that's the only time I ever went. And so when we socialized, we came together for homecoming each year. But in terms of, playing cards together or sitting together at lunch or doing any of those things, we were all segregated. Now, nobody told us to be segregated.
Right.
we just hung out with our friends. And then depending on what classes you were in, you had those class friends. So before I got kicked out of my classes in junior high, all of my honors classes except English, for talking back to the teachers, I was in a group of like, it was two classes, two groups of 30 students, and we were basically in honors classes. So I was in all classes with them. By the time I got to high school, I was only in honors English. So I saw those kids, and then I saw everyone else, regularly. But, we didn't talk to each other on the phone. We didn't hang out and go. Now, there might have been small groups. There were a couple guys that I can think of who were Black and they hung out with these people. But at the same time, we didn't. And it was just how it was. And when I left Missouri and I went to California to live, we called the Chinese food Chinaman. That's what we called it. That's what people say in St. Louis. But that's offensive. But that's what we learned to do. We're going to the Chinaman. Okay.
Right.
So there's a lot of traditions and things that we did. And as Aaron and I talked, yes, Ms. Baker Bradford, he was one of our students at Riverview Gardens. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
That is, she was my 8th grade English teacher, and she's my sorority sister and sorority sister mama now. And she's always very supportive. So I just wanted to bring that up. And Aaron, as we talked briefly, a lot of the white students who went to Riverview are ashamed, because back then Riverview was the #1 school district in the county. And they're ashamed to even say they went to Riverview. What's that about? Why do they want people to think they're from St. Charles?
I'm not really sure, but I'm thinking that the Riverview area might have gotten kind of a bad rap, I guess, from the Ferguson issue and, just, and I think that more people were identifying with the St. Charles area because it's, I guess, a higher class, I guess you could say. Myself, I always tell people where I'm from. I always tell them I'm from Riverview Gardens. I went to a school, not in the city. It was in the suburbs, but it was kind of like a city school. Mm-hmm. We did have a pretty good demographic there. I thought, but like I said, I think that people identifying with St. Charles, I'm proud of where I come from. I tell people all the time where I come from. I'm not afraid of it. But I don't identify from St. Charles, or I went to St. Clair High School, which is just west of St. Louis for a while. But I always claim to be from Riverview Gardens High School. Mm-hmm. So, now I lettered in golf, so I can't say much on that. But
thank you.
But yeah, it was great.
Thank you. And for those of you who are watching nationally and internationally, where we went to school, where, you heard of Ferguson, Missouri, and they kept using Ferguson, but Ferguson is really a suburb of St. Louis, and it's really around the corner from where I had my first job. I worked at Ponderosa in high school, and I didn't even know that was Ferguson. I thought it was Delwood, but it was St. Louis County. But they did a really good job of trying to soup up the world to think that to distance St. Louis from the Michael Brown issue. So anyway, yes. I just want to say that. And so when we're talking about, where we went to school, in St. Louis, this is a big thing. If you ever talk to somebody and they say, oh, you're from St. Louis, where'd you go to high school? And that's like the question. And everybody's so proud to say, I went to this school. Oh, my hair is, okay, sorry. I went to such and such. Oh, I'm messing it up more. I went to such and such. And then it's like, okay, well, we think it's all innocent and everything, but at the same time, it's not innocent, because people will classify you. Oh, you must be this socioeconomic class, or you're this, or you're better, or you're less than because you went to this high school. And it is a very subtle way that many of us didn't even have a clue of what we were doing when we were revealing where we went to high school. But this is how it is. And I see James shaking his head and everything. You got something to say about that, James?
Yeah, I do. Let me jump in very quickly here. And just two things on this. I went to East St. Louis Senior High School, and I also attended Boston University, which is where Dr. King, since we talked about Dr. King, got his PhD in systematic theology. And what I would always get whenever I was in Boston and they would ask you where you were from, I would always say East St. Louis, and they would automatically try to make me be from St. Louis, Missouri. Yes. So it got annoying after a while to try to give them a geography lesson. So I began to say I'm from Illinois, and then it's, oh, what part of Illinois? East St. Louis, because I made a concerted effort to distinguish myself from St. Louis. Now, once they didn't have the Google back then, but many of the people at BU with me who are from Chicago, they knew all about East St. Louis, and East St. Louis hasn't had a stellar reputation, even when it was majority white. It was an all-America city at one point, but it was known for gangster activity and that sort of thing. But that and we're talking about segregation. What I found interesting at Boston University was that there were so few blacks who attended that we would invariably find each other in the cafeteria and we would sit together. Because if you've been in a class all day and 99% of the people in the classroom are white, you're going to look for people that look like you just so that you can identify, so that you can kind of relay the stories and the experiences that you've had as a group. But I would find my white classmates, they would always say, why do all the black kids sit together? Why are you guys always sitting together? So I would always, coming from me, this brought the East St. Louis out of me. I'd always say, well, let me ask you this. While we're over there sitting together, who were you sitting with? And he got that intentional, that pause that we just got here, because they were sitting with people that were like them. Yes. So I said that to tell them, look, you're sitting with people that you have something in common with, the same way that we are. And you have to understand, we're a minority here at this school. So we need to be able to relate to each other, because I don't think you're going to have my back if something goes down here. So I need to talk to people that look like me. So it is a common thing. And I'm glad, Jo Lena, I'm glad you clarified this for people that are listening who are outside of St. Louis about that high school question, because any place else I've ever visited in this country or outside of this country, when they ask what school you went to, they want to know what college you went to. They don't want to know what high school you went to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know. We're getting a little static on the line. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was on my end. I'm sorry.
Okay, Michael, thank you. Okay, so we have a question from the audience, and the question is, and one of you can take it. I don't want to call on you, so just think about, okay, it says, what is the utility of race as an identifier in the 21st century? What is the utility of race as an identifier in the 21st century?
It depends on who you are. If you're a politician and you engage in politics, as many of them do, it is very convenient when you have a Stacey Abrams or a Raphael Warnock, and the opposition darkens your image in your campaign ads, because it's a dog whistle and it plays to the racism in Georgia, or in terms of signaling to them, you don't vote for this person because they are an other. So if you're a politician and you're engaging in political trickery, politics, it has a utility of convenience for them in that respect. So I'll touch on that part. Maybe the other gentlemen have some other use or utilitarian use for it. And
James, I have a question for you based on what you just said. I'm not 100% sure of what you just said. Are you saying that that politicians would use race as saying don't vote for them?
No doubt.
To maintain power.
It's a fact.
Okay.
That's a fact. I don't know if you've seen the ads, but I saw the ads. They were showing it on one of the Talking Head shows, and they showed a side by side of what the persons look like and how they darkened the ads because they knew it would appeal to their base, and or if they were contemplating voting for this person, not to vote for them because they were depicting them as an other.
Okay, I got it. Because sometimes I think it works in reverse in a way. It's like the old trope of, hey, I have a black friend. And so they can use, so some white politicians can use that for like, hey, with their arms around a Stacey Abrams or somebody like that and it seems to work that it can work in the other way too, although that's certainly not I don't know. That's Georgia. It's to racism.
So it'll work in a place like Georgia. If it were New York, it might work in reverse. But we're talking about Stone Mountain, Georgia, which is on the outskirts of Atlanta, where they have a monument to the Ku Klux Klan, that
Absolutely.
the same sculptor who did Mount Rushmore did for that region of the country. So
right. And Stone Mountain, I mean, literally, I don't think people know that. Say that again, James, because I don't think a lot of people know
there
that.
is a monument dedicated to the Ku Klux Klan at Stone Mountain, Georgia. I had to point that out to a former colleague of mine who was posing and grinning in front of this monument. She's a Black woman, Panamanian, but as a matter of fact, and she was grinning, but she didn't know. So I had to give her the history. And in fact, I said, look at what you're posing in front of. They're on a horse riding with Ku Klux Klan garb on. And again, the same Mr. Burglum, I believe is his name, that designed the Mount Rushmore. He did that monument for it outside of Atlanta.
Yes, thank you. And so, you know what, although I didn't want to talk about any particular politicians, because you brought this up, I would say that in what other world would Herschel Walker be running against Reverend Raphael Warnock? I mean, you know, and so, and then in what other world where all the things that have come out about Herschel Walker's background, including him denying that he, you know, paid for abortions and all this stuff, why would he be supported by so many white people? Because that's who's pushing the agenda. And I would go further to say that they chose him because he was a popular Black man in sports, so that they could have, whoever they is, could have him as a spokesperson so that they can win the seat and then do whatever they want to do with it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if anyone disagrees with me, but that is my 2 cents on the subject.
It is true. That is a certain level of politics that goes on in addition to voter suppression and that sort of thing. It's same thing. And it's all racial. You look at an area where they're engaging in voter suppression, where they have guys dressed up with camouflage and guns sitting outside of polling places. I guarantee you they're in areas where they're trying to suppress a Black vote or a Hispanic vote. So it's very it's ominous, but it's very racial, and it's targeted to keep that group from voting the same way they used to make. And in my grandfather's day, back in the day, they'd ask you how many bubbles were in a bar of soap. They had the polling taxes, all these other things they did that were designed to keep us from voting.
Yes, thank you, James. Michael, you raised your hand.
Yeah, but I already forgot it. I was just
sorry about that, Michael.
No, that's fine. Could you? Oh, I do.
Okay.
Know. I've got it.
Okay.
This is when you brought up Herschel Walker, to me, you brought up another whole topic about racism, and that's part of the effects. And this is something that I think a lot of, and some of the things I say are really directed at old white guys like me.
Okay.
Because there's this perception that the past is the past, and look, everything's equal now, and it's just so ridiculous because everything isn't even as equal as it was shortly after the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. A lot of things were problems, and obviously, and people were fighting against it. But when a race has been enslaved, whether physically or in other ways, kept marginalized and disenfranchised for years, the tendency to me is to that when freedoms come, those who were enslaved, those who were marginalized and disenfranchised, want to be like the ones who did that to them. And that's where I see Herschel Walker come in. And to me, that's just another whole thing. And that's why we can't say, well, the past is the past and that's done. Any old white guys listening and that believe that and say that, reevaluate what it means to be a human being. That's what I want to say.
They don't believe it, Michael. They're just not going to say it like you just said it. They aren't going. They know. Divide and conquer is one of the oldest tactics that was used as far back as slavery. To pit the house Negro against the field Negro, to pit the Black woman against the Black man, to pit the young Blacks against the old Blacks. This is how they kept them enslaved on the plantation. This is how they always had people that were looking out for Blacks who were attempting to escape slavery. They always had an informant or someone inside, because they kept them pitted against each other, and they gave privileges to some of those who were doing their bidding that they didn't give to the ones who were doing the labor. So Herschel is an example of one who was in the house. He's easily controlled. He's not very intelligent. He's not very articulate, but he's one we can trust because he's going to be one that we can tell what to do, how to think, how to vote, and how to act. So this is why they support him.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I want to go. So I am looking at my Facebook and there's a couple of comments that I want to read. So in preparation for that, James, I would like you to share. I know exactly what article Michael is talking about your grandfather. And I know that was a long article. So I don't know if you want to share that.
What you Cliff Note version.
Okay. So I'll do that in just a minute. And then you might have another story, but it's very fascinating. So I would like you to share. Okay. So one of my Facebook friends says, the truth is the design of generational advantages in institutions like education, economics, politics, property, law enforcement, judicial systems, and family resources is to create this very socially stratified reality that Americans will debate until our great, 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 great grandkids. If the percentages change and the U.S. becomes a more multiculturally educated and accepted society, then the president will have to be the first Native American or something. I thought that was a thoughtful comment. What do you think? Yeah. Karen, she said, I moved to North County in 1977 and she graduated from Riverview Gardens in 1981. And back then, as a Black person, I didn't want to tell people where I went to school in those times. And she agrees and laughs at the word politics. So it's very interesting as well. The cat is kind of out of the bag, as you will, that a lot of people with agendas are beginning to run for races in the school boards and things like that. When we went to school, I don't know that there were a lot of banned books, but banned books is another issue. And then the whole not wanting to talk about slavery at all in schools and wanting to, as they call it, whitewash history is just really fascinating, to say the least, and maddening, actually. The same person who said the other comment, America is so socially stratified, being proud to be better than each other is normalized in daily activities of living, from your zip code to the area code to the fraternity or sorority, to your church, to your annual income or marital status. Embracing differences is just in the USA DNA. I think that's very thoughtful. And that is so true. And so when I said we have the human race, we have ethnicity, and then we have the competition. So I didn't say elections on purpose. We have competition. And as long as people walk around thinking I'm better than you and feel like it's okay to treat people that way, it's going to be a problem. So I want to share something that happened. Two things. One of my best friends from school, she posted yesterday on IG, and she had her arm in a sling. And she said, I had rotator cuff surgery. And, it's almost over, but I'm going to have this arm in a sling for another week or so. And would you believe that 3 old white men, each of them separately asked me, did my husband beat me? And I said, what? Now, I could go and read it, but I'm summarizing what happened. Okay. Oh, I didn't know I was going to see. Okay. And she said the nerve for them to think. Now, she is married, but the nerve, the gall, the audacity. Now, she is my age, so she is over 50 years old. And the audacity for someone to feel so comfortable in their skin that they feel like they could walk up to a grown woman and say something like that is just mind-blowing to me. And then I read another post today, and the young lady said that she was she had a toothache and everything, and she had gone to the store, and she was in a parking lot here that was in North Carolina. Here in St. Louis, she was in a parking lot, and she was getting ready to pull out, and a white lady put her basket in back of her car on purpose so she couldn't get out. And she said she kept on trying to go out, trying to see if she's going to do it. The woman looked in her eye. She still made eye contact and still kept the basket there. And then all of a sudden, she said, when I was getting ready to get out, now this young lady, you know her, James, but I'm not going to call her name. She's Black and Asian. So she calls herself a Blasian. Okay. And so she has gray hair. So, it's clear she's an older person. a little older. You know what I'm saying? And so she was getting ready to get out the car. And then this man started yelling, and it was an old white guy. He said, I see what you did. You're doing that wrong. Move that basket. And he started cussing her out. And she was like, whoa, I'm so glad he did it and not me. But while it's kind of nice and funny, it's terrible at the same time, because why would somebody go to the trouble when this woman is just minding her business, shopping in the store? Why would somebody be so ignorant as to put a basket behind them to inconvenience them so that they have to get out of the car? And I know we used to be passive aggressive, but now there's aggression. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I was just going to say the thing about that is my response to people like that and to comments that I hear made from some people who in the past I probably would have categorized as friends, is why do you hate yourself so much that you would do something like that? Why do you hate yourself so much that you would do that to somebody else? Because that's what it gets down to me. That's the spirit side of things. And until that is acknowledged, that's what drives this kind of behavior and this hatefulness. And James, one thing I wanted to get back to that you said before, and it has to do with this, is the old divide and conquer thing. That's what whites did to the indigenous peoples. Mm-hmm. They did the exact same thing, but with the tribes. And there was always be an insider. There would always be somebody that wanted more, and that could find advantage. And it's just this thing of you really have to hate yourself to hate other people that much.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. Thank you so much. Oh,
there's a word for that, Jo Lena. I call it caucasity.
Okay, can you give us a definition of caucasity and politics?
This outbreak of Karens and other people that we see around the country that like to blow up Black people for living while Black and inconvenience us in ways that are ridiculous. That's the caucasity, the nerve of certain Caucasian people, not all Caucasian people, yes, but certain Caucasian people to say and do things. I can tell you, I remember flying on a plane coming from someplace, and there was a white couple sitting next to me, and they were coming to St. Louis, as a matter of fact. So they were from St. Louis. So they kept looking at my hand, and they kept looking at it. I just blew it off. I was tired, and they said, "So what sport did you play?" And I said, "Excuse me, what sport did you play?" I said, "I don't understand the question." They're looking at my class ring. So I said, I didn't play any sport. It's a college ring. And then it occurred, I said, "Oh, I got to be an athlete in order to do this stuff." So it gets back to what the original point that you made. There are a lot of assumptions that are made about us as Black people in this country, that if this woman was injured in some way, that her man had to beat her up, because after all, we're brutes. This is what we do. I see them on the news every night. They lead off with Black guys that are brutalized people, so therefore they must all be brutes. I watch them on the NFL. I watch them in the NBA. They got to be athletes if they went to college, because how else are they going to get in? No, certainly they couldn't have had a good SAT or ACT score. That's not the way that they get in. So a lot of assumptions are made in the broader society, and they're perpetuated in the media that we watch every day, and they were internalized and shared within certain communities. So it's the stuff that's internalized but not necessarily said, and it creates a certain level of comfort that when they express it to us, that I got to be right. I got to be right, because this is my experience. So that's where a lot of that emanates from.
All right. Well, very good. Well, I appreciate this. Aaron, do you have anything you want to share before James gets into his story?
Yeah, I wanted to say, first of all, I wanted to say hi to Miss Baker, or else she's going to come get me. Okay.
Yes, good job.
She's going to come get me if I don't do something. Well, I just wanted to say that that James, you're spot on, man. I think that living where I live, I think that there's a lot of just ignorance to how people are treated altogether. I think that in general, we've lost the point of caring about other people. And Jo Lena, your story about the shopping cart, really kind of touched me a little bit, because to be honest with you, I yell at my wife because she's standing in the middle of the aisle at the grocery store. You know what I mean? It's just about caring about other people is what I'm saying. And I think we've lost that along the way. And I think we're losing it even further. I would like to say that we're going to do better, but I just don't have that much hope, to be honest with you.
Well, this is not a news show. And again, I don't want what we're talking about to be outdated, but I will say that I saw that Marco Rubio did win in Florida, so Val Demings lost, and of course DeSantis is the Florida governor again. I don't know that I was surprised by that second one. I was hopeful about the first, and it's not that I'm endorsing a particular candidate. I just endorse what's good for humans, and I think people are making decisions that are not good for humankind. And I used to be hopeful, but one thing, if you remember when COVID first happened, you know, we were all inside and we were like, we don't know if we'll ever be able to go outside again. And people were doing TikToks and we were cooking and we were sharing and it was kumbaya and we just wanted everybody to live. And then as soon as somebody brought race into it and said, oh, people of color or Black people are more likely to get it, or the Chinese were the ones who spread it, then all of a sudden, oh, forget everybody else. I'm just in it for myself. And it hurt me to my heart that humans were so hateful. And I don't believe that to be our truth. I don't believe that to be the truth, but I believe it to be many people's truth. And that is what bothers me. That's one of the reasons I wanted to do the Authentic Joe Show, is because I want people to have a place where they can come and think about other ideas, think about other concepts, get different perspectives, and perhaps make better decisions. That's my goal. And I just want to thank you all because I respect you. I appreciate you. I'm glad that you're willing to speak up and give perspective and speak to this because it's very important. It just means a lot to me. And I hope that when people watch it, it will mean something to them. With that being said, James, can you talk about your grandfather, please?
I will do this, and I'll give you the Cliff Note version of this. But if for those who want to read it in its entirety, they can always go to the stlamerican.com website, go to columnists, and pull up James Ingram, and everything's archived there. So my grandfather.
And I would tell you, look, James, I said, please, if you're watching this, go read it because it's excellent.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to hire you as my publicist.
And me too, yeah.
That's being an ally. I appreciate that. But my father's name was my grandfather's name. My maternal grandfather's name was Ira Smith. He was born in 1913 in Columbus, Mississippi. He became, used to be a field worker, but he was an excellent driver, and he was tapped to become a chauffeur and a valet for a gentleman by the name of Gaston Thurl. He was a rich cotton broker, and my grandfather spent a number of years driving him all over the South, cutting deals with governors and other individuals for his cotton business. And my grandfather always, I'd go over there every Sunday and have dinner, and he'd share these stories with me about chauffeuring through New Orleans and in Memphis and all of these cities. And he would tell me about how segregated things were. That if he went to Memphis, he couldn't stay in the suites, or initially wasn't allowed to stay in the suites with the other whites who were in the hotel. And that Mr. Thurl insisted, no, this is my valet, this is my chauffeur, and he'll be staying in my suite. And he asked to see the owner, brought him down, and he negotiated that they would put a rollaway bed up there for him to stay there, while the other domestics ate in the basement of the hotel. So he talked about driving all over the South and how governors and other elected officials would sit in this massive Cadillac that he would be driving this Mr. Thurl around in, and they would make, drop all kind of N-bombs and all sorts of things with him sitting there as if he was invisible. And he would hear this dialogue, these opinions about Black people as being animals or less intelligent than they were, less hardworking than they were. And he had to smile. He had to grin and bear it because he had a family to take care of. Mm-hmm. So he talked about all of these stories. And eventually, just to cut to the chase, Mr. Thurl died. Mr. Thurl had a son who hated my grandfather because of the privileges that he enjoyed as a result of valeting. My grandfather wore nice suits and spit shine shoes, and he traveled and he was intelligent. So when Mr. Thurl died, his son told my grandfather, he said, yeah, now your Black behinds are going to be back in the field with the rest of them. Your chauffeuring days are over. So before he could even do that, he framed my grandfather. He tried to, he asked my grandfather to deliver a load of books to a dormitory of co-eds, white co-eds. And he tried to say that my grandfather attempted to rape one of these white women. So they put him in a prison camp. So my grandfather's working there, and one of Mr. Thurl's white friends who knew my grandfather, knew about his character, saw him there, and he said, Smith, what are you doing here? He said, well, they said I did X, Y, and Z, and they put me here. He said, he came back on a subsequent visit. He said, you still here? And he said, yes, sir. He said, I said, are you still here? He said, yes, sir. He said, well, stay here then. Basically winking to him that you need to get out of here. So my grandfather swam across the Tombigbee River back to my grandmother. She packed up his little belongings. He got on a train and got up to East St. Louis. Relatives got him a job. And then eventually he got a better job being a custodian, one of the main custodians for the St. Louis Public Library branch, where he retired from. And the letters that they wrote about my grandfather were glowing about his work ethic, how he took care of not only his vehicle, but their vehicles, how he made sure he got there super early so that the sidewalks were cleared, that they learned. One of the guys who was the head librarian, and one of the gentlemen from the Federal Reserve Bank wrote a letter and said, I was a child when I met Mr. Smith, but he meant as much to me as some of my own uncles and fathers, because he taught me life lessons. He never was too busy to share with me and pour into me. And this was a great man. So to show you how some little black guy from Columbus, Mississippi could impact and inspire people that were actually leaders in St. Louis was always encouraging to me. And my grandfather, he never spoke of the situation in a hateful manner, but he would always do it in an educational way to let me know, this is what you're going to have to deal with. This is how you deal with people that underestimate you, who depict you as being less than what you are. You demonstrate by your work ethic, by your integrity, by your manhood, who and what you are. And eventually, somebody will respect you. All of them won't, but some of them will. So that's the Cliff Note version of it. I'd encourage people to go out and read it.
Thank you so much for that, James. I really appreciate it. This is a lot. I want to thank you all. I have another quote that I want to share. Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever. Aaron.
Yes.
What would you like people to learn? If they could learn something, if you could teach them something, if you could say one thing that you would like people like you, your peers, those people in rural towns or those people who are our age, what do you want them to learn?
I want them to educate themselves. I want them to educate themselves on all cultures. I want them to educate themselves on truth. And that's what I would want. I want them to educate themselves. I'm running into a lot of people that are just not educated on what the facts are. And with COVID, it's dipped some people into some dark areas. So it's going to be up to us to speak the truth to power.
Very good. Thank you. Michael, what do you want the old white guys to know?
What I would like them to learn is to love themselves, and then look at anyone else and everyone else they meet in that love, in the light of that love, to love themselves for who they really are, and to understand that we are all expressions of spirit incarnate. And yes, the material side is there are horrible things going on, but until that comes, everything else is going to be just a facade. And so that would be my wish, is that everyone would learn to love themselves. And all the work that I do, the writing that I do, the other work that I do is predicated on that.
Can you tell us a little bit before we go on? Tell us a little bit about your work. And we do have YouTube to subscribe to your YouTube channel. So you have a book. Could you tell us a little bit about that? The name of it?
I'll quickly show it to you. Can you see that?
Oh, yes. Let me get rid of this. Yes.
Martin, Maya, and Me, A Brief Exploration of Social Injustice.
Yes. Fantastic.
And obviously it's something I feel very strongly about. And so I just look at that. I look at, because I was an English teacher for many years, I look at Dr. King's letter from the Birmingham City Jail and kind of break that down. So I look at it a little bit. I don't want to make it sound really horrible, especially for people who hated English. I look at it a little bit in a literary analysis point of view, but and then intertwined with that are some experiences that I had and my opinions about those things. And then I use Maya Angelou's On the Pulse of Morning, and I approach that in the same way and say, okay, what does, and I love the way, so maybe here's what I wish people would learn more than anything that I have in the book is how Maya Angelou ends that poem. Well, it would be her wish that everybody would just look at the other and say, good morning. Good morning.
Very interesting. Thank you so much. You know, I want to comment on something you said. If people would learn to love themselves more, I never, until maybe 2019, I was at a church activity, and I was the only, I was the speaker for the event. And I had mentioned that I was leaving for Dubai the next day, and there was a clear gasp in the room. And then somebody said, you know, they were just outdone that I was going to Dubai. Now, my dad was paying for it, okay? But at the same time, later on, somebody said, you know, people were angry at you. I said, why? And they're like, because how dare you go to Dubai? And I thought that was interesting. And then we talked about racism because this was a core topic. And someone said that a lot of times people's self-esteem is so low that they need to make other people feel lower than them in order for them to feel better about themselves. And that was the first time I had heard that, because I don't understand hate. I don't want to understand hate. I just want it to go away. And what I've been taught is if you have a deep understanding of something, that means it's something inside of you. So I'm glad I don't understand it, but it doesn't mean I condone it. So I just want to say that. Okay, now, James, I want to thank you for what you've said. Did you explain what politricks was? I don't know if you gave us that definition.
It is the use of political trickery in terms of persuading people to vote in the manner in which you want to vote. And it could be anything from whisper campaigns to interfering with the electoral process to an October surprise where they come up with some scandalous information on you at the last minute to sway people to vote for you, or just engaging in just willful lying and manipulation of data and facts in order to get your vote. So that's what politricks is. I would like to say I invented the term, but if you listen to reggae music, Bob Marley used it liberally in a lot of the songs that he sang. So that's what it is. But,
you just brought it into the 2000s.
Yeah, I use it from an East Boogie perspective.
I love it. Okay, well,
let me say, so my personal mantra is if you don't stand for something, you know, you'll fall for anything. But I like to leave you with this story. At the end of Frederick Douglass's life, you know, he'd had a number of meetings and he was tired. And I think this was about 2 weeks before he passed away. So he was headed back to his home. And there was a young journalist who'd been trying to get in touch with him. So he said, Mr. Douglas, I'd like to ask you a question. I know you're tired. And he went ahead and engaged him. So he said, I want to know, as an aspiring journalist, what bit of advice would you give to me? So Frederick Douglass, you know, he became kind of pensive, a little thoughtful, and he looked back and he said, agitate. 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 And I take that. That is what I live by in terms of what I write when I write my columns. I take the position that you know, I'm like throwing a rock and ducking, because I'm gonna write what I consider to be my authentic truth, to throw it out there, and you don't like it, too bad. That's not my problem. That's your problem, because the truth you know, stands on its own.
Very good. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for taking the time with us this evening. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you were here with us. And if you don't mind, if you'll stay with us for just a moment while we finish up, if you stay in the studio just for a moment, I would appreciate it. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If you can put them in the studio, please. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. So it's time for my final thoughts. Back to the slide. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. We've heard a lot from these three gentlemen. My hope, my prayer even, is that you got something that you can take with you to consider. Maybe you got some insight. Maybe you got an answer. Maybe you got curious about something that you hadn't even thought about. Maybe you just spent your time tonight instead of looking at the news, and you're going to go now and look at the news, and perhaps our world will even be different tomorrow because of what has happened tonight on election night. Whatever it is, your thoughts matter. So if you believe you don't deserve anything, you don't. If you believe you're better than everybody and you have the right to treat people like a piece of crap, you will. But there will be somebody bigger than you and crappier than you that will hurt your little feelings. Time is not to be played with. Life is not to be played with. We are all humans being, and we have the right to be our very best. And I believe in you, and I'm going to ask you to treat yourselves well. As a matter of fact, treat yourself good, absolute good. Treat others absolutely good as well. Because karma matters. Each of us matters. And in order for this world to be set right, we must know that we matter and do something about it. I'm Jo Lena Johnson. It's been a privilege and an honor to be with you this evening. Please share this video. Please like the video. Please talk to people about the show. Please subscribe to YouTube. And please keep on keeping on. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.